Hello, so welcome to another reading blog. This week, I thought it would be funny if I read these two big chunky books together, mainly because they have the same name. Is that a good reason? Not really, but I don't know, I find it amusing. And maybe I'll compare them and see which one actually deserves the name. So, firstly, I have, quite good for leaning on, I have The Gathering Storm by Robert Jordan, and this is actually the first book in the Wheel of Time where Brandon Sanderson helped to finish it. I don't actually know how much Robert Jordan wrote and how much Brandon Sanderson wrote. To be honest, I'm kind of hoping it was more Brandon Sanderson and less Robert Jordan. So this is where I admit that I read up to book 8, and from book 4, I was really struggling with it. So at book 8, when I just felt like nothing was happening and I didn't care about anything, what I decided to do was I went online and I found a bunch of plot summaries and I read them. Up until book 11, and then this is book 12. And from the plot summaries, I'm pretty sure that this is where the plot actually starts again, because in the plot summaries for the first few books, there was quite a lot of information. And then all through the middle, what people call the slog, the plot summaries were like one paragraph, like hardly anything was happening. So I don't think I've missed anything. And it's quite possible that if I read this and I hate it, I don't know, maybe I'll try book 13 before I give up and just go back to reading the plot summaries for the rest of the series. But I don't know, we'll try this. I don't know whether I'm going to like it. So if you haven't heard about the Wheel of Time, I don't know how you've managed that. Although, admittedly, for a lot of the book series, nothing is happening. And a lot of the really cool ideas that are set up at the start of the series, so far, it hasn't really done much with them. So, in the first book, we're following this boy named Rand al'Thor and his other friends from the small village, and they kind of get embroiled in this prophecy in this bigger world where time is circular. So kind of every age we have the Dark One coming back into the world, and there's basically a chance either for the good side to win or the bad side to win. And as I said, there's some really interesting ideas in there. There's like dream magic and kind of like multiverse stuff almost, and just a lot of really interesting stuff. Nothing happens with it, in my opinion, but we will see. To be honest though, I started this. I have not quite finished the prologue. And so far, it's been pretty boring, which is not a promising start. Like, the first, 15 pages or something were just this random farmer that we don't even know being like, oh, look at the clouds. And then his neighbor is leaving and he's like, oh, maybe I should leave too. Like, we did not need 16 pages of that. I feel like a lot of the time the writing is trying to be really descriptive and metaphorical, but I've just read so many other books with more beautiful writing, and I wish it wouldn't do that. This is where I also admit that I don't really like The Lord of the Rings. The description drives me mental, and I wonder if that's what Robert Jordan was trying to emulate, which would probably appeal to a lot of people, but it doesn't appeal to me. But still, I'm going to try. So this is a really fat book. It is like, actually it looks fatter because this is like, I don't know, quite thick paper. So it's about 760 something pages. But the pages are quite long, so it takes a while to get through them. If I'm going to get through this whole book this week, I need to read at least 108 pages a day. I don't know if I can do that, but we are going to try. The other book that I have to read is The Gathering Storm by Kate Elliott. So this one is the 5th volume of the Crown of Stars series. The Crown of Stars series is a 7-book volume. This one is the fattest one. To be honest, about 6 months ago, I started reading this and I didn't get very far through it. There is something about Kate Elliott's writing that I struggle with. However, I struggle with Robert Jordan's writing, but this, I'm just having a bad time. This, if I can get through it, I find it really interesting. There's so many characters that I care about. Like, coming back to this after not having read it for so long, I felt like I would have forgotten about a lot of things. And like, it is true, every time there's a new character's perspective that we come to, I'm like, who is this character again? But very quickly I remember, and then I am invested in what's happening to them. It's just that there's like so many characters, and I've taken so long to read this series that like that's kind of ruined things a little bit for me. However, my approach to get through this faster is the audiobooks. So the audiobooks for these are only just being recorded because this is quite an older series. So this was released in 2003, 20 years ago. When was this one released? 2009. You know, that is a point towards this one getting to keep the name. But they're both kind of older books. But this one is basically like this big conflict with people fighting over the throne. We also have these dark magicians trying to do things. There's like an upcoming cataclysm that's kind of repeated itself from previously. And there's a whole bunch of like other people that aren't really people. So there are these, originally when I was talking about the series, I was always calling them dragon people. I do think the book has also moved towards calling them more rock people, or I think they call themselves rock people, but the main kingdom we started with called them dragon people, but they're more like rock people. There's also these other people that kill griffins and then attach griffin wings to their backs with like metal frames so that they can kind of fly. And so we've got griffins. There's also been a dragon and some kind of goblins and all kinds of magic things. Some of our characters are descended from these people that I want to say are like elves. There's also some weird time stuff in there. I always love weird time stuff. Honestly, I want to say big series like these are often hard to describe because there's so much going on. This series I feel like is hard to describe because there's almost lots going on but actually nothing going on. It does make it easy not to spoil this one though. Anyway, this one I have the audiobook, and if I want to get through the audiobook in this week, I need to listen to 3 actual hours a day, which I don't know if that's achievable, especially because, as I've mentioned, I recently moved in with my boyfriend, and he has been away over the last weekend, but he's coming back, and I don't know when he's next going to go away, and I have my doubts that I can listen to 3 hours of audiobook when he's around. Just because, like, when I'm by myself, I can listen to my audiobook, like, while I brush my teeth in the morning, while I make breakfast, like, all the time. I can listen to my audiobook. But when you're living with someone else, that's the kind of time when you talk to them, and it's very rude to be listening to your audiobook at 1.75 speed, which they 100% cannot understand and find very annoying. So, I don't know if we can get through this. I do also have the audiobook for this one if I need help with this one, but the problem is that I won't have time for more audiobook stuff. Although I could try doing the thing where I listen to the audiobook while I read this, which I have had success with in the past, but I think I'll see if I can just get through it by reading it by myself first. If I need help, I've got the audiobook. So I feel like this might be a bit of a challenge, but I'm going to try anyway.
From the top, hit restart. So far it's been so hard to live, but lately something in me changed.
Hello, so let's start with the good news. I've been progressing with this. I think I'm about 40% of the way through. It's Wednesday, so I'm like about on target for finishing this week. And I am really enjoying it. There are some bits where I feel like I tune out. Partly I think it's because sometimes the audiobook narrator talks really low. And because when I'm listening, when I'm out for runs, if I'm by a busy street, sometimes it's really hard to hear her. Like I just got to a part where there's these centaurs, like female warrior centaurs, which is really cool. But the narrator was kind of doing it like they're whispering all the time. And I was like, what? Can't hear you. As well, the narrator pronounces a lot of the names differently than I've always thought of them. I'm pretty sure that's me getting it wrong, but it has taken a while for me to stop having to like translate what the narrator's saying to what's in my head. As well, like there's just so many characters in this, but I really can feel everything kind of escalating and starting to come together, which I think fits the name. As well in this, I really like, there's quite a few instances where it's kind of trying to flip things on its head. So I was thinking a lot about all the men in this book that are often described as beautiful, which is something you get in fantasy books all the time, where all the women will be described as beautiful. So it's quite a refreshing change to have it be the men. And there's like so many men that it's not like all of them are being described as beautiful, but some of them are. And it's also looking at that in interesting ways. Like there's one quite young man who's really beautiful, and these women keep trying to like essentially kidnap him and force him to marry them. There's also quite a few like beautiful men who are also the bad guys. So it's looking into the idea that like just because people are beautiful on the outside doesn't mean that they're beautiful on the inside. But also like so much going on in this that I feel like I struggle to keep it all in my head, and I don't think that's just the audiobook. I think it's like always, and just that I've taken too long with this series. Maybe one day I'll have to reread the whole thing on audiobook in one go. But for now, I'm enjoying my adventure, which contrasts a lot with this book. So, this gathering storm is not gathering because I am not making progress on it. I am 80 pages in, so I haven't even read my first day's worth yet. In fact, I've only read 2 chapters. The first chapter was Rand. What was he even doing? Worrying about things. And I guess like trying to manipulate people. Although I have 1 tab so far because I kind of thought maybe I'll tab all the parts where Rand really annoys me. And this was just him once again saying about how women are so strange and he'll never understand them. Oh, it also says, besides, he didn't need to understand women in order to use them. And this is meant to be the hero of the book. Oh, as well in this, we've got Min, who in the first book was really interesting. She was such an energetic character, and she has the ability, like when she sees people, she sees symbols that like represent their future. And yet in this chapter, all she's doing is like sitting around worrying about Rand because he's so important and she loves him so much. And I just... why did you destroy her character? It really just makes me feel like Robert Jordan himself doesn't really have like any insights into like human psychology or human behavior. Like even, anyway. Then I got up to the next chapter, the second chapter, and in this one we have Egwene, and she's kind of in this White Tower trying to infiltrate some of the bad guys. As unspoilery as I can get. But it's so dumb because it starts out with her like coming out of this punishment where she's been getting the strap, but like she keeps talking about her backside being sore, so it seems like essentially she's just getting her bum smacked. And it seems like that's the punishment that all these women are getting whenever they do like anything wrong. And like she just keeps having to go constantly and get these punishments, like get her bum smacked. Like what? Is this really what Robert Jordan thinks a society of very powerful magical women would be like? And then as well, like Egwene decides that she's going to pretend that she's going along with things, even though she's already not been going along with things. So like, what kind of a pretense is this? Anyway, 2 chapters in, and so far I'm hating it, which does not bode well for me continuing this series. And I'm thinking about DNFing it already. Or maybe I should just read the plot summary and then skip to the next book, which is entirely Brandon Sanderson. I just don't know. I don't know. I'll keep reading this. Maybe. I can't see myself getting through it very fast. And like I'm only on target for the other book, so I'm not ahead. So the chances of me getting to the audiobook for this are low. I don't know.
Lazy Sunday mornings, hiding under covers. I don't mind staying in with you. Play your favorite movie, laying right beside me. I don't mind when it's just us two. That corner coffee shop we like to go. Late night walk walks with you to take me home. With you I never feel alone.
These little songs make me glad to call you mine. And you have got my head in the clouds.
Hello, so it is much later in the week, and to be honest, I have not read much of either of these books, but I have made some progress. So let's talk about this one first. I'm about a third of the way through, and maybe I'm starting to become more interested in it. I still don't think it's good, but like I'm not hating every single word that I read, which is an improvement. I started tabbing a few other different things, still not many tabs, but there's been like 2 plot points where like some dark magic stuff happened, kind of like the dark one attacking, and those parts, even though they were over much quicker than I would have liked, I liked the horrible images that they put in my head. And then there was kind of another thing that's happening that I don't mind. So like, you know, out of 250 pages, we've had 3 interesting things happen. The rest is just annoying me so much. I think one of the things a lot of people compliment this book on is how Robert Jordan brings in all these different cultures. But I do feel like there's a lot of people just complaining about each other's cultures, especially like Avienda, always complaining instead of like trying to understand people. And so for me, that doesn't really bring the right attitude to the forefront when we're talking about different cultures. As well, like Robert Jordan just has all these descriptions all the time. I think another part I tabbed is where we have one guy who's like a army guy, very boring in my opinion, and he's describing all the moves he's doing as things like kisses the honey rose, hummingbird. He immediately moved into apple blossoms in the wind, and I don't know what any of that looks like, so that was really boring to read. And all the bits, I guess the problem with the end of this book series is that it's all preparing for this big battle, and I don't tend to like books that focus on like war and battles unless there's something more interesting underneath it. So, not loving this, but like I've started to get through it. It's almost the end of the week though, so I'm very behind. We'll see whether I make it all the way through. The other thing is this Gathering Storm. So for this one, I actually am about halfway through, and we just had like 2 characters that have been apart for a long time that I've been waiting to get back together. Finally, they got back together, which was very exciting, although it hasn't entirely gone to plan. As well, like both the characters that know about this upcoming cataclysm are back in the story, and that's the part of the story I find more interesting. Again, the part where it's all about this battle for the throne, and especially like the actual armies fighting each other. Not my favorite part of the story, but when we get into this dark magic and like this impending apocalyptic event, much more interesting. So I think now kind of the characters are coming together again a bit. They've been all over the place, and it's more when they come together and their storylines start interacting with each other that it gets more interesting. So yeah, I'm getting really interested in this one too. I feel like I'm enjoying both of these more, but this one I started out more positive, so now I'm really enjoying this, whereas this, it's still a struggle, but I guess I'm going to keep pushing through. Good morning. So last night I managed to get just past halfway into the Gathering Storm. I'm very proud of myself. I feel like it's taken forever. It does not usually take me a week to read that many pages. Maybe it does. It's like 400 pages. That's a normal book, right? But anyway, the exciting thing about this is there was a scene where I was actually engaged. I don't think you should have to read 400 pages to get one scene that you're properly engaged in. But I was excited to like be going, oh no, what's going to happen? And like to actually, did I care about the characters? Maybe briefly. And I'm hoping we'll get more of that kind of part of the story. As well, I am kind of enjoying Egwene's storyline where she's trying to infiltrate this organization, even though I do get a little bit frustrated that Robert Jordan's like constantly telling us how brilliant Egwene is, and I'm like, is she though? I don't really believe it. But also, like, I think I can relate to it because she's kind of in this position where she's trying to improve this organization, but she doesn't really have any proper authority. She kind of does, but not really. Do you know, that's kind of the description of my job when I was a Scrum Master. Trying to make things better, but like all you've got to work with really is logic and hope. So I'm kind of enjoying that storyline. As well, we finally got a chapter from Matt, who is my favorite character. I've always thought Matt's my favorite character. However, this chapter with Matt, all he did was complain about women, which probably is aligned with Matt's character, but he also didn't really do anything else, which isn't what I want from Matt. So I'm a little bit worried that in the books that I skipped, Robert Jordan has ruined Matt. I guess we'll see. The other thing, so like, I've also been making progress on The Gathering Storm. I think I'm about 3/4 of the way through. Hopefully I can finish it. I want to say today, but it'll probably be tomorrow. It's Monday now. I was meant to finish all these yesterday, but it doesn't matter. I can make it work with my reading plans. It doesn't matter. It's just reading. We're doing it for fun. Anyway, this one. I feel like since I last talked to you, actually not that much has happened. But that doesn't mean that it was boring like this one is when nothing's happening. Like, actually things are happening to all the characters, but just because there's so many characters, what's happened to each one has only been a tiny part. But that said, each character has had like emotional things happening to them or significant things happening to them. It's just like, in the bigger scope of the story, it's almost like these individual characters' pains don't matter, and that's almost one of the themes of this book, is that like regardless of what's happening to individual people, like these big cataclysmic events will still happen and affect everybody. Anyway, I am having fun with this, but what I'm going to say is this has a lot of characters. I can pretty much keep track of all of them, even though sometimes I come back to them, I'm like, who is this? And also the audiobook doesn't have enough gaps between the chapters, so sometimes you slide from one character to another without realizing, and then you're like, wait, what? Why is this character here? And then you realize you're now following a different character, and I wish the audiobook producers would put more obvious gaps between the chapters. But anyway, in this one, we also have a lot of characters, but a lot of them are minor characters that don't matter. And so this one, when it feels like nothing's happening because we're covering so many characters, a lot of those characters don't matter. And also it's just confusing. So I just read a chapter last night, and let me see if I can find the stupid names. Oh yeah, so we have one character who's called Shamiran. Then we have another character who's called Shuriam. And these two characters are currently like in the same place interacting. And like one of the characters, we're kind of following her perspective and she's thinking about the other one. And it's super confusing. And also neither of these characters matter. So why are you making me put so much effort into telling them apart? So like I actually wish in this one that they had cut down on the characters and just focused in more on the important ones. And like when they need a character to like do some kind of sneaky thing or like, I don't know, cause something to happen. Like, why not use one of the main characters? I know it might take a bit more work to make the plot work, but I think you could have done it instead of adding all these characters that I don't care about. And maybe it's realistic to have lots of characters involved in these big world-changing events, but like, don't make me remember characters that don't matter and don't make them have the same names when they're talking to each other. Anyway, maybe I'm just dumb to not be able to keep track of everything, but I just don't like it. So I guess like, I'm liking this better than I was at the beginning, but like, am I liking it? Not really. Anyway, my goal is to finish both of these by the end of tomorrow, Tuesday. That's about as far as I can extend it without really being annoyed at these books ruining my reading plans. I don't know why I thought I could read both these books in 1 week. That wasn't sensible, but we're going to try and finish them by the end of tomorrow. I don't know if I can do it. Hello, so it's Wednesday, which means, of course, I didn't keep up with my plans, but I have finished this Gathering Storm, and I think actually for this one, what I'm most excited about is the next 2 books. I think right at the end of this was quite a big battle, which we've been building up to, I guess. Maybe justifying the name, and like actually the use of a storm, kind of relevant. And I did really like the way the battle included like griffins, and there were centaurs. and there's been mermaids involved, maybe before the war, not actually in the war, or the battle. So I really like the use of different mythological creatures, and like there's a lot of cool dark stuff happening, but the actual battle, I got a little bit bored at the end. But I do think it set up some really interesting things to go on in the next 2 books. I do actually also know that Kate Elliott originally, I think this was only meant to be a trilogy, and then it ended up being 7 books. So I'm kind of hoping going into the last 2 that she's really focused on like knowing exactly where she wants to go. And it did kind of seem like in this one that things were starting to come together. In the previous book, things were kind of like expanding still in the 4th book in the series. But this one, I think things started to come together at the end. So I am excited to continue this series. I don't know when. Maybe soon. Oh, and actually, I did also tab this quote that I wanted to read you. I just think I really like in this book how sometimes it like does that thing where it's turning, I guess, sexism on its head and looking at it from a different way. So there's one part where these centaurs and all the warrior centaurs are women, and Leath wants to have this man in this conversation they're having, and the centaur says, "I am not accustomed to the presence of males who claim to speak with authority. They are emotional and unstable. I grant you that a stallion may be a handsome creature, but all he is good for is fighting and breeding." Still, because I have known a few human males who have, what shall I say, been able to think with the same rigor and intellect as a woman, I will allow those you mentioned to join the council. And I just really enjoyed that. So, lots to enjoy in this one. Then, and this is a little bit surprising, I've actually been enjoying The Gathering Storm. So I started, I think last time I talked to you, I'd already started like listening to the audiobook and reading it at the same time. And when I first started doing that, I felt like the audiobook was dragging me along with it, and I could kind of not even keep up because I still didn't really care. However, I've found now I'm at about 150 pages from the end, and at this point, sometimes I'm even reading ahead of what the audiobook is telling me because I want to know what's going to happen next, and the audiobook's going too slow for me, even though I'm going 2 times speed, I think. But yeah, Rand did something that was awful, and it shocked me, and I had feelings about it. Amazing. I still don't like Rand, but that was an interesting plot point. And then Egwene trying to infiltrate this organization, like what's been happening there has been really interesting. And so like I'm actually engaged. It only took like 600 pages, but I'm actually engaged in it, and I'm excited to finish it, and maybe even excited for the next books. This is an amazing occurrence. I don't know how this book has turned itself around. It does make me wonder if the beginning was more written by Robert Jordan and the ending was written more by Brandon Sanderson, because it kind of, almost a couple of things that happened feel more Brandon Sanderson-ish to me. Anyway, I'll finish this off and then I'll let you know whether I feel like the ending kept that going. Hello. So I finished this off. I just feel very proud of myself for making it through, but also like super happy that I don't know if I could say that I liked it, but like relative to my experience of The Wheel of Time since the 2nd or 3rd book, like this was much improved. The end of this was much improved. I must not forget that the beginning was a struggle. But the ending, I felt like things came together really well. I do remember, though, that some of the Wheel of Time books in the beginning of the series felt like at the end they had very solid ending compared to the meandering of the rest of the books. Because part of me is tempted to say, like, one of Brandon Sanderson's strengths is that he, like, seeds things throughout the story and then at the end they all come together really well. And this felt a little bit like how Brandon Sanderson does it. But Robert Jordan kind of did do a little bit of that as well, but not in the way that Brandon Sanderson does it. So I'm wondering if like it's Robert Jordan's ideas but like Brandon Sanderson's execution that managed to bring it together as well as it was done. But also like I didn't love this, but just relative to my experience of The Wheel of Time so far, this actually gives me hope that the next 2 books might not be awful. And that's kind of amazing. I will say though, I've just remembered I have one tab in here because there is one part where there's the ceremony and all these powerful magical women have to like take off their tops to show their breasts to prove that they're women. And I thought that was dumb and I hated it. So, not great still. We still had all that bum smacking the whole way through here, and just like always the men complaining about women and people complaining about other cultures, and just like there's a lot to dislike in this still, but I'm just so relieved that it got better. I still don't know that I would recommend The Wheel of Time, but let me see once I've read the next 2 books. I still can't see that it could be worth the slog. But mainly I just want to know what everyone's talking about because I am nosy. Anyway, if I am comparing these 2 books, I still enjoy this story better. I think it's got a lot more interesting elements and I like the characters a lot more. The characters in this are just not my favourite. I don't relate to them at all. I suppose some people will, but I do not. These ones, much better. As for which one deserves the name more, I mean both of them, the name makes sense. So they probably can both keep it. It's just confusing. So I guess that is my week of reading. It took me until Thursday, so it took me almost 2 weeks, but still, to get through both of these, I'm pretty proud of myself, pretty happy with that. Do let me know whether you've read either of these books or either of these series because I would love to talk with you about them down in the comments. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well and I will see you next time.